any Bible takes the place of the King James, it will be this New International Version. I find more using it than any other. It's the one that's called the NIV version, and it's in contrast to the NAS version. You see that all of these, it's about as confusing as anything possibly could be. Now, I'd like to take the King James Version, and there are several very difficult passages that you have, and you have to understand. Now, I'm going to take one that has been given to us to show that it's hard to understand, and it is. That's Psalm 119, 147. And the way that the King James has it is, I prevented the dawning of the morning. We know that the English word prevent does not mean to hinder, but actually means to go before. And I go before the dawning of the morning. And I like it that way. I think that's very beautiful if you just understand what the word prevent meant in that day. But now, that, of course, gave a field day to the boys as they attempted to translate it. And you'll find that the New American Standard Version, and I'm going to turn to it, and it has translated Psalm 119, 147. It says, I rise before dawn and cry for help. And here they have a little note on it. They don't want to take, full responsibility, and they give you the literal, which is anticipate. And may I say to you, I don't know why they didn't put that in the translation, because the word means that. It does not mean I got up. It means I anticipated. The man could still be lying in bed, and he could anticipate the dawning, and it would actually make sense. I anticipate the dawning, and I cry for help. Before I get up, I cry for help. And may I say to you that I don't think the translation has been helped any at all by this. So let us maybe look at another one. I want to turn, for instance, to the one I've referred to, because the two that are out in front today are the New International Version, and also this one that is the New American Standard. The New International Version, unfortunately, I did not turn to it, but I understand that it follows the usual pattern of I got up, and it's not quite like that. There is the idea that it just simply means I got up before dawn. I'd like to go now to a version that a great many pass by, and I would consider it one of the best that we have today, and that is the Amplified. That is, if you're talking about new translations, and I'd like for you to hear the translation that's given in the Amplified. And this, may I say, is closer to the original than any of the new translations. It says, I anticipated the dawning of the morning and cried in childlike prayer, I hoped in your word. In other words, you have here really a literal translation. In other words, in the morning, before he got out of bed, he anticipated. And I think all these new translations have just missed it, absolutely missed the very subtle point that is given to us there. And you'll find that others have attempted to give us a translation, and there's one that I follow a great deal, and that happens to be the American Standard Version that goes back to 1901. I think it's probably more literal than any that we have. And it has, I anticipated the dawning of the morning and cried, I hoped in thy words. And very frankly, that is probably closer to the original than any. And that's exactly what the King James is saying. If you just take a little time and study and find out what prevent really means. Prevent doesn't mean hinder. Prevent means to go before. Before, venio, go, to go before. So we've got the word meaning something that the opposite of what it should be meaning today. And so that would give the student a good lesson in words today, a word study that is very desperately needed by the way, in this hour in which we live. Now, I would like very much to say just a word, therefore, about these translations in connection with another translation that is given. And I probably should bring in here the New King James Version. The man who translated the New King James Version really had a task set before them. I was put on the original committee that had oversight of it, and I got off of it because, candidly, I didn't feel that I could give it the time that it should have, that if you're going to deal with a Bible translation, you sure better be able to give time to it. And I didn't have the time to give, so I got off the committee. But the horns of dilemma on which they were was this: they had to retain as much of the old King James as they could, and yet they had to do enough of changing to call it a New King James translation. So they really were on the horns of the dilemma, and they got rid of the these and the thous. Well, and all the translations have done that, of course, and I do not see why we can take maybe 3 minutes and tell little Willie or little Susie that thee and thou was the way that they spoke back in those days, and that it was rather a reverent way of speaking and not the flip way of speaking that we have today. Our language is anything but reverent. There's nothing reverent in Americanism today, nothing at all. And therefore, to translate the Bible into the common colloquialism of the street, you'd really come up with something. Somebody says, well, it was translated in the common language of that day. Yes, but they had a reverence that we do not have today. We're a flip generation. We are a cynical crowd, and therefore, I don't think it ought to be put in our language. I think it'd be kept in a language that we could show reverence for. And that's one of the things that I think these new translations, their self-defeating purpose is to give us something that is modern, but I want the Word of God. And I don't want some street language that's used today that's highly irreverent.